All right, we're back. Stop in the name of God. We're chapter 1, I think section 4, it says number 3, God created time. There was no before in any human sense. No ticking clock, no passage, no beginning or end. Time itself was summoned into existence by divine fiat. In the opening words of Genesis, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The phrase in the beginning is not merely poetic, it is metaphysical. It signals the dawn of chronology, the very first moment when duration entered the cosmos. In the New Testament, the Apostle Paul also affirmed the creation of time, stating in 1 Corinthians 2:7 that God had detained the coming of Christ for our glory before time began. Prior to creation, there was only the eternal, timeless presence of God. From that stillness, he spoke, and with his words came not only matter and light, but sequence, succession, and rhythm. Out of this divine order, God established a framework for existence, not chaos, not randomness, but intentionality and structure. The act of creation unfolds not in a single burst, but across 7 distinct intervals, each with its own purpose, culminating in rest. This pattern is not arbitrary, it is a sacred architect, a divine template for life itself. The 7-day week, as we now observe it, is not a human intervention. It is a reflection of God's own work. 6 days you shall labor, but on the 7th day you shall rest. Exodus 34:21. He commands his balance of labor and rest not simply as a rule, but a reenactment of his own rhythm. Humanity was not merely given the gift of life, but the gift of God-ordered life. Remarkably, this structure, the 7-day week, has persisted through millennia, across cultures and civilization without anchoring itself in astronomy, like the day, month, or year. There is no planetary cycle that demands a 7-day rhythm, and yet it prevails. Why? Because it speaks not to the mechanics of the universe, but to its meaning. It aligns not with the stars, but with the soul. The human spirit, body, and society thrive under the cadence. This works, finds purpose when it moves towards rest. Rest finds holiness when it reflects the Creator's own pause. The Creator reflects the Creator's own pause. Throughout history, human beings have not only attempted to govern nations and remake economies, but to reorder time itself. Nowhere is this more evident than in the recurring attempts by secular, revolutionary, or totalitarian regimes to erase or reshape the 7-day week, a cycle instituted not by empire philosophy, but by divine ordinance. Genesis 2:22 and 3 records, and on the 7th day God finished his work that he had done, and he rested. So God blessed the 7th day, and he made it holy. This rhythm of 6 days of labor followed by 1 day of rest is not cultural intervention, but sacred architect. Nevertheless, ambitious regimes intoxicated by the idea of progress or control have attempted to overwrite this divine template with man-made systems, believing they could engineer a new kind of society by even reshaping how people count their days. Their experiments have invariably failed. One of the most dramatic and ideological driven of these attempts was the French Republican calendar, implemented during the height of the French Revolution in 1793. And in an effort to obliterate the influence of the Catholic Church, obliterate the influence of the Catholic Church and Christianity itself, the National Convention introduced a new calendar as part of a sweeping program of de-Christianization. The 7-day week was abolished and replaced with a 10-day cycle, or a decade, in which only the 10th day was designated as a rest day. The traditional Sunday, long rooted in the Jewish Sabbath and sanctified by Christian observance, was deliberately erased. Revolutionary thinker Gilbert Rome, who led the calendar's development, is attributed with describing it as a way to emancipate the mind from superstitions born of tyranny and arrogance. The days of the week were replaced with secular designations, and even the names of the month were changed to reflect seasonal features. Brumaire, fog; Thermidor, heat; Florel, flowers, to align time with nature rather than divine order. The calendar was implemented with ideological fervor. Churches were shuttered, religious symbols removed, and public festivals renamed to glorify labor, harvest, and reason. Maximilian Rasberto, architect of the Reign of Terror, promoted a cult of the Supreme Being to supplement Christian worship, and it is attributed with declaring that the idea of the Supreme Being and the souls of morality is a continual summons to justice. But the practical results were disastrous. Workers, forced to labor for 9 days before a break, became fatigued and resentful. Families, disorientated by the unfamiliar cycle, struggled to maintain social bonds. Rural population resisted, and underground religion gatherings proliferated. Even in Paris, enthusiasm waned. Napoleon Bonaparte, never one to allow ideology to interfere with national cohesion, quietly abolished the Republican calendar in 1806, restoring the Gregorian calendar with its traditional 7-day week. A century later, the Soviet Union, under Joseph Stalin, undertook a similar audacious attempt to erase a biblical rhythm of time. And in 1929, the regime introduced the Soviet revolutionary calendar, first adopting a 5-day work week known as a Nepreveka. Continuous work week is what it means. Rest days were staggered among the population, meaning the husbands, wives, and children often had different days off. Intentionally designed to prevent social and religious gatherings, Stalin's commissioner described the reform as necessary to eliminate religious influence and maximize industrial output. Sunday worship was criminalized in practice, if not in law, and churches already under attack lost their temporal anchor. The Communist Party's newspaper, Pravda, declared that we have no need for priests, we have our machines. When the 5-day system proved chaotic and inefficient, it was replaced in 1931 by a 6-day week, which likewise failed, and by 1940 the Soviet Union reluctantly reinstated the traditional 7-day cycle. The Soviet people were not only exhausted by this calendar experiment, they were spiritually, socially fragmented. Historian E.H. Carr observed the attempt to destroy the rhythm of life ended in the disintegration of the labor force itself. So Soviet propaganda may have tried to fill the gap with images of tractors, workers, and smokestacks, but it could not replace the human need for shared rest, worship, and rhythm. The machine could not become the sanctuary. Though Nazi Germany did not formally change the calendar structure, it too sought to sever the spiritual authority of the Sabbath. Sunday rest remained technically legal, but it was quietly repurposed for national service. Ideological instruction, party activities. The Hitler Youth held events on Sundays, and churches were discouraged from asserting any independent claim over the day. Adolf Hitler himself viewed Christianity with thinly veiled disdain, describing it in Hitler's Table Talk as Jewish intervention. In the first creed in the world to exterminate its adversities in the name of love, his goal was not necessarily to replace the Sabbath outright, but to co-opt it, transforming it from a holy day into a day of militarized unity and ideological programming. Over time, the Nazi regime hollowed out Sunday of its spiritual significance, using it instead as a tool of the state. Even in our modern democratic societies, the Sabbath has not been abolished by decree, but slowly eroded by culture. The rise of the 24/7 consumer economies, digital technologies, and work from anywhere expectations has blurred the boundaries of time. Sunday has become a day for errands, sports, emails, and binge watching, another cog of the machine of productivity. The idea of sacred rest, of a divinely appointed pause, has been quietly sidelined. Yet, even in the absence of formal policy, the effects mirror those of more overt interventions: burnout, spiritual exhaustion, fractured families, and a profound sense of restlessness. With all these experiments shared, whether revolutionary to Taylorism or subtly commercial, it is their ultimate failure. When the societies attempt to re-engineer time, to override the divine cadence embedded in creation, they eventually collapse in disarray or quietly return to the old rhythm. The 7-day week, and with its Sabbath, persists, not because of inertia, but because it aligns with something eternal. As a Jewish philosopher, Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote in The Sabbath, technical civilization is man's conquest of space. The Sabbath is man's conquest of time. In erasing the Sabbath, societies lose more than a day of rest. They lose a sense of holiness, orientation, and soul. The divine rhythm laid out in Genesis has survived revolutions, dictatorships, and consumerism because it speaks to a truth greater than a political ideology or economic efficiency. It's not mere useful, it is sacred. Those who have challenged God's calendar, rather with guillotines or 5-year plans, have faded into history, and the Sabbath has remained. All right, the end of that section.